My father worked for the Rock Island Railroad from 1916 to 1961. Other family members also had careers there. As a result, I've had a lifelong interest in the Rock Island. Several years ago, I was driving on a highway that paralleled a former Rock Island main line for many miles. It made me curious about what was left that was still identifiable to the Rock Island. I decided to visit each line of the railroad, see what was left, and compare how it looks today with how it looked back when the Rock Island was still an operating railroad. I wondered what remnants are left of this mighty fine line after all these years since it ceased to exist. This program isn't all-inclusive. I know that there are a lot of physical signs of the Rock Island that I've missed, but this is a look at what I did discover during my journey, following the lines of the old Rock Island. This first program looks at the Golden State Route. The Golden State Route ran from Chicago, Illinois to Los Angeles, California. The Rock Island operated the line from Chicago to Tucumcari, New Mexico. The Southern Pacific the rest of the way to Los Angeles. The Rock Island actually owned the tracks for another 59 miles west of Tucumcari into Santa Rosa, New Mexico. But the crew and equipment change point was established early in the relationship to be at Tucumcari. What eventually became the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad was originally chartered in 1847 as the Rock Island and LaSalle Railroad between the Illinois and Michigan Canal at LaSalle and the town of Rock Island and the Mississippi River. The charter was amended 4 years later for a railroad to be built between Chicago and Rock Island, so that connections could be made with the eastern railroads that were then entering the Windy City. This railroad, the Chicago and Rock Island, ran its first train in October 1852 between Chicago and Jolliet, Illinois, on what would later become the first leg of the Golden State Route. The first chapter of the journey is from Chicago to Joliet, Illinois. A trip west on the Rock Island's Golden State Route starts at Chicago's LaSalle Street Station. The original LaSalle Street Station was built in 1852 and was replaced in 1866. The second station was soon destroyed in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871, but was rebuilt. The fourth station was opened in 1903. The primary users were the owners, the Rock Island and the New York Central System, but other railroads, including the Nickel Plate and Chicago and Eastern Illinois, were tenants at various times over the years. By the 1970s, the station was showing its age, and all that was left for LaSalle Street Station were a couple of Rock Island intercity trains, the Quad Cities Rocket and the Peoria Rocket, and the commuter runs to Joliet. By the late 1970s, all intercity traffic was gone. The New York Central had moved out in 1968, and the Rock Island ended its intercity passenger service in 1978. The building known as LaSalle Street Station was demolished in 1981. Today there is a fifth building at the location, housing the offices of the Chicago Stock Exchange. Chicago's commuter service, Metra, operates a station under the name of LaSalle Street Station as a part of the new building. For many years since its construction in the early part of the last century, photographers have used the vantage point of Roosevelt Road in Chicago to capture Rock Island and New York Central trains as they would arrive and depart from LaSalle Street Station. In this photo, the Rock Island's Golden State departs on its way to Los Angeles in the 1960s. Another view from Roosevelt Road shows a commuter train on its way to Joliet in 1975. LaSalle Street Station can be seen in the background. Also visible off to the east is the tower of the former Dearborn Station. Once the Chicago home to the Santa Fe, Chesapeake and Ohio, Chicago and Eastern Illinois, Erie, Grand Trunk Western, and Monon railroads. Dearborn was abandoned as a rail station with the creation of Amtrak in 1971. Today, the scene is very different, with the Chicago Stock Exchange building occupying the space where the old LaSalle Street Station used to stand. Commercial buildings on the east and west of the tracks now block the view of the surrounding area. But from a vantage point further to the east, the Dearborn Station Tower, under repair, can be seen as the building still stands. The station is minus tracks and its train shed, as it now houses office and retail space in the trendy Printers Row district of Chicago. Looking north, this 1977 suburban train photo shows the dirty underbelly of urban railroading at that time, as the Rock Island runs along Clark Street just south of Roosevelt Road. Some 35-plus years later, this view from Roosevelt Road looking south at the same area shows how much has changed. The area to the left, where the Erie Freight House once stood, is now occupied by modern condominiums and businesses. The area to the right, once occupied by coach yards and a piggyback facility, is now vacant. Just south, the Rock Island's entire inner-city passenger fleet is shown. Inner-city passenger service on the Rock Island is nearing its end in 1977 as the Peoria Rocket and the Quad Cities Rocket pass at 16th Street Tower. A look today at this bridge over Cermak Street is a reminder of who once ruled the rails leaving LaSalle Street Station. At 47th Street, the Rock Island had its locomotive maintenance facility, appropriately called the Rocket House. The main building still stands today, in use by Metra, but some of the facilities that were once at this location have long since been removed. As southbound trains neared 63rd Street, they were approaching Englewood Union Station. Englewood served the Rock Island on the west side of the station, the New York Central on the north side, and the Pennsylvania on the south side, its line coming from Chicago Union Station to the west of LaSalle Street Station. Englewood Union Station was once important as it allowed an easy transfer point between the eastern trains of the New York Central and the Pennsylvania and the western trains of the Rock Island. This was the preferred transfer point for many travelers that did not want the stress of changing trains and possibly stations in downtown Chicago. Today, nothing remains of the old Englewood Union Station, and the area is primarily in use as an intermodal facility. Further south, a typical suburban train of the late 1970s pulls through Blue Island with an atypical for the time locomotive. Almost 40-year-old E6A number 630 is the last of its kind still operating at the time of this photo. Earlier in its career, it saw use on the railroad's long-distance rockets and Golden State passenger trains. This train is on the suburban line that veered west from the main line at 89th Street and rejoined the main line 6 miles later just south of the Blue Island commuter station. Today, the suburban trains belong to Metra. Just north of this location is the old Rock Island Burr Oak Yard. Burr Oak is still in operation, and this Iowa Interstate train passing northbound by Blue Island Station will be entering the yard in just a few hundred feet. The Rock Island continues south through Midlothian, where a modern metro station stands today, and through Oak Forest, where a new station is being built, and on to what was once known as Bremen. When the Rock Island built through this area in the early 1850s, all three communities, Midlothian, Oak Forest, and this village, were already inhabited areas, but they developed and grew with the arrival of the railroad. For one of these villages, to show the importance of the railroad, the original name of Bremen was changed to honor the Rock Island station agent, Samuel Tinley Sr. Bremen became incorporated as Tinley Park. Then comes Mokina. And further west, the Rock Island approaches what almost became the town of Tracy. This town also wanted to honor the Rock Island Railroad through its first township name. It was going to be named Tracy after a superintendent of the Rock Island Railroad in 1852. Mr. Tracy respectfully declined the honor, and the township became known as New Lenox. This metro train goes under the old Wabash Railroad Chicago to St. Louis main line as it approaches New Lenox. The bridge can be seen in the background. The former Wabash line is now operated by the Norfolk Southern. The route is now turned from running southwest to primarily west. As the Rock Island enters Jolliet, it runs past the location where a small yard area of the Rock Island once existed. Just to the west of this location is a new yard used by the Metro Rock Island District. Then it is on to the Joliet Diamonds, controlled by UD Tower, as shown in this 1975 photo with the tower on the left. Looking south, this photo shows a passenger train arriving at the south side platform of Joliet Union Station that was used by the Rock Island. Today, only one of the four original tracks of the Rock Island is left at the Diamond as it crosses the tracks of the BNSF, once Santa Fe, and Union Pacific Canadian National, once Chicago and Allerton. Joliet Union Station was built in 1912 and was designed by Jarvis Hunt, the architect that also designed Kansas City Union Station. When it was opened, Joliet Union Station hosted over 100 passenger trains per day of the Rock Island, Santa Fe, Michigan Central, and Chicago and Allerton, and two interurban lines, the Chicago and Joliet Electric Railroad Company and the Illinois Traction Company. Joliet Union Station is nearing its end as a railroad station. The building will remain in other uses, but a new transportation center for Amtrak and commuter rail will replace it. The Metro Rock Island District's portion of the new station will be on the east side of the Diamond to avoid commuter train interference with the BNSF, Canadian National, and Union Pacific. Leaving Joliet Union Station, the Golden State route continues westbound, heading for the railroad's namesake city. The story of the Rock Island Railroad continues on Where the Rock Was, Part 1. For more information, visit www.rockislandvideo.com.